Okay, Dad. We're on TV.
Well, hello, everyone. Today is June 2nd, 1980. I'm about 62 and a half years old, and my son Bill is here, and he wants me to say a few things about my ancestors and, incidentally, yours. So we'll give it a try. Now, for instance, I have a picture here of my grandfather.
Hold it up a minute, Dad. I'll focus it in.
My grandfather, Napoleon LaFleur. This picture was on his calling card because, as you see, it says, I will call on or about such and such a date and time. This picture was given to me by my mother's sister Ruth, his daughter, and was taken about 1908. And I would judge, as far as I can tell, that Nap, as he was called, rather than Napoleon, was about 44 years old at this time. But I think the picture is remarkable because it shows his nice black hair, his starched collar, and how neat he was when he went on the road for Nichols, Dean, and Gregg, the hardware wholesalers. Now, Nap was born, as far as I can remember from my information, in 1864 in Ontario, a little place called Bell's Corners, which was evidently a suburb or shortly out of, close to Ottawa. And Nap was apprenticed to and finished his apprenticeship as a carriage maker and a blacksmith. And he was very proficient in both. And of course he later married Louise Baillargeon. He had 3 daughters, of which Edna.
Was that Baillargeon or Bourgeois?
No, Baillargeon.
Oh, Baillargeon. How do you spell it?
That's spelled B-A-I-L-G-E-R-O-N. That's pretty close, but it's pronounced Baillargeon. It's not Bergeron or anything like that. It's like, phonetically in English, we'd say Baillargeon, if you know what I mean. You know, B-A-I-L-L-E-G-E-R-O-N, something like that. Well, anyway, his oldest daughter is my mother, Mary Edna, and he has 2 other daughters, Ruth and Lucille. All of them are still living, thankfully. Nap died in 1939, and his wife Louise died in 1932 at the age of 52 only. So that's a very brief history of 2 of my grandparents, who are probably great-grandparents or great-great-grandparents of some of those of you who are watching this cut. Okay, now continuing a little more about Napoleon, or I should say Nap LaFleur, whom you saw the picture of a little while ago. Just to tell you a little bit about him, because I could speak here for a couple hours and not do him justice. I said previously that Knapp was very proficient in his trade as a carriage maker and a blacksmith, and he was, and he made a very good living at it. And he drifted to North Dakota. I can't tell you what year. It was probably in the 1880s.
How did he happen to come to North Dakota?
Well, he evidently was looking for work, and he evidently wanted to get out of Ottawa, because he was the real driver in his family, from what I can determine. So he went up into the Red River Valley. At Grafton is where he wound up. But on the way down, he made his way by helping construct a grain elevators on the Sioux Line Railroad, which ran down through Ardoch, Forest River, and so on to Grafton. That's how he made his living. When Knapp got to Grafton...
one more interruption, please. Was he married already when he was doing...
No, he was single.
Then where did he meet his wife?
Well, we'll get to that.
Okay.
When he got to Grafton, one of the first things he did, from what I can understand, is at that time there was good land available for the taking by homesteading, and what they called proving up a claim. You had to live so long on it, and the land was yours. Well, evidently Knapp went out and he staked a claim to some beautiful acreage on a farm. And after he had it sewed up and proven, he brought his folks, his parents, and his brothers, I think he had one or two, and a sister, and ensconced them on the farm, because Knapp was a leader, and he was a doer. Sometime in this period, he founded his own blacksmith shop and carriage shop in Grafton. And he was, you might say, a prominent businessman in this town. He worked at his trade, and he did wonderful work, and he prospered. To get to your question, I'm not quite sure where and how he met Louise Baillargeon, but somewhere he did. And Knapp, of course, was a bachelor. He was, old Leah used to claim that he was at least 40.
Now, what was Leah's connection?
Well, Leah was Louise's sister.
Oh, I see.
Who had come to the frontier with her sister Louise, who later became Knapp's wife, and they were orphans, and they were really hard up. Well, anyway, Knapp met Louise, they liked each other, and they became man and wife. They were married in Grafton.
He was how old?
Well, I don't really know. Some might dispute this. Some might say he was younger. But in my own opinion, he was over 40. Probably 41 or 42. And Louise was a lovely young girl, about 18 years old. She was much younger than that. Anyone has to concede that. But anyway, they got married, and he worked in the shop, and he provided a very good living. And also, when he married, he took on old Leah, because she was single and an older sister of Louise's. And he not only got Louise, he got Leah too, as far as taking care of her is concerned. Although I will say, from what everyone says, Leah was a hard worker. She was an accomplished saleswoman. And she worked in ready-to-wear, and I'm sure that Leah always supported herself. I don't think that she ever had to accept charity from old Nat. But anyway, he got them both, you might say, when he married Louise. And of his marriage to Louise, there were 3 children. My mother, Mary Edna, Ruth, and Lucille. And my mother was born in Grafton in 1898. Ruth, or Toots as they call her, was born in Grafton also, I believe, in about 1902. And Lucille was born, I believe, in Grafton about 1906. Well, anyway, to make a long story short, the years passed. Here Nap was with 3 daughters, a wonderful wife, and getting back to how he settled his folks on this land, and his brothers and his sister, he also employed his brothers in his blacksmith shop and carriage shop. And I understand that one brother, Joe, in those days, you know, the circus used to make all these small towns. And I remember Knapp saying, now one day they called and they wanted a blacksmith to help out. Their own blacksmiths at Ringling Brothers Circus. He sent Joe down and he never seen him again. Because when the circus left, Joe left. And he became a wanderer. And that took care of one brother. Jack, or John, Knapp's younger brother, who worked with him, he finally became, although I believe he was a very good blacksmith, and he was a big, strong, husky man, he evidently became dissatisfied with the blacksmith trade and where his life was going. And so Knapp got him a job as a salesman for a hardware wholesaler, Williams Hardware Company. I'd say this was along about, I really don't know, but I'd have to say it would be, maybe 1906, 7, or 8. So Jack, he left, and he went on the road. Well, then, I don't know whether business conditions became a little adverse or whether Knapp got a little restless or what. But he decided to go on the road as a salesman for hardware, heavy hardware. And as I showed you on this picture before, his calling card, which Ruth, who gave it to me, is dated 1908, he went on the road. And he was selling hardware. Well, somewhere along about this time, in these years, I mean, from 1906, 7, or 8 to 1913, and Knapp also worked for the Williams Hardware Company. He worked for Nichols, Dean, and Gregg, and I think he worked for another one. I just can't recall the name of it. Ordine something. Ordine Wells?
How about Kelly Howe?
Yeah, Kelly Howe. He worked for them. That's
Kelly
right.
Howe, and the connection later, Ed Bergeron married Michelle.
Yeah, well, that's another story. But anyway...
I know, but there is a connection there.
Somewhere in these years, Knapp, for reasons unknown to me, maybe my mother or Toots or decided to move to Minot. So in 1913, Nap moved lock, stock, and barrel to Minot. He sold his business in Grafton, and the first thing he did in Minot was buy his family a nice home, which is still standing down there at 528 Valley Street. And he took care of his family. Well, along about this time, for reasons unknown to me, when World War I came, Nap, who was quite an adventurer, and he was like the old French-Canadian voyageurs, adventurers, he decided he wanted to go to World War I. And he was too old to fight. He was too old to go in the Army.
How old was he?
Well, as close as I can determine, he must have been damn close to 50 or over. But he was a well-preserved man and very active and very vigorous. But he had this itch, he had this idea and this adventure and spirit that he wanted to get into this big thing called World War I. So I won't go into all the details, but he was a very good Catholic and active in the Knights of Columbus. And he managed to get himself appointed as a Knights of Columbus, and not a consular, but in those days they didn't have USO. The only thing the troops got was the Salvation Army, the Red Cross, and the Knights of Columbus, who were very active in World War I. And they maintained what they called huts, H-U-T-S, which were kind of a USO or a meeting hall where the soldiers could come, get free donuts and coffee and socks and sweaters and knitted stuff from home and cigarettes. And the Knights of Columbus sponsored this. And Nap was in charge for a pretty big area in France of some of these installations. So he went to war. When he was gone, of course, they didn't have the allotments and the benefits that later came on for service wives and children. And Louise and her kids had to work very hard. They had a garden, and they took in roomers, and my mother has often said how she can remember sleeping in the dining room because they rented her bedroom out. Well, anyway, Nap was gone. I'd say he must have been gone pretty close to 2 years. And they had damn tough sledding. And when Nap came back after the war and the armistice, in the meantime, my mother started going with Mark Purdy, and they got married, and I was born. So Nap was a grandfather for the first time. I've seen a card he wrote me one time where he referred to me as Mickey, my grandson, which was probably quite a thrill to Nap because I know how I felt when I became a grandfather for the first time. So Nap came back, and believe me, they were all damn glad to see him. Louise and Toots and Bubby, I'm sure. They were all glad to see him. Of course, my mother was married by this time and out of the family nest. Well, he came back, and as I say, Nap was a doer. He was a go-getter. So he took the first job he could get because things were a little slow then after World War I in this country. Damn slow, from what the history books tell us. So he took a job assembling stoves for a hardware man who had a store there by the name of Hodgkins. I think it was Hodgkins. Anyway, in those days, there were an awful lot of coal-burning and wood-burning heaters to heat the house and to cook, ranges. And these stoves came unassembled, in parts, in a kit. And old Knapp was handy with tools, and he took the job of assembling these stoves, putting the parts together, putting bolts in, putting nuts on, tightening them up. And old Hodgkins could sell a complete stove. Well, I don't know how long Knapp did this, and of course it didn't pay that much. But he got dissatisfied after a while, and after he saw the economy picking up and what could happen, and he was a very far-looking and not a visionary, but a very perceptive man. To make a long story short, he cashed in some insurance policies and grabbed $1 wherever he could, and he started his own hardware store. And he became very successful at it. And in our next episode...
just a minute. What about, wasn't that store where Paul now has his office?
Well, this will come later in the next episode. His first store was around the corner and a half a block down on what would be First Street, Southwest, where he started.
Is that building still standing too?
No, that's torn down. I think that's all parking lot now. But it was approximately across from what used to be the old Daily News building. But anyway, in about I'd say 1920, 21, Knapp started his own hardware store called Dakota Hardware. And in our next little episode, I'm going to tell you a little more about that.
Okay.
Cut. Good night, Lenny. Oh, did you stumble? Good night now.
Lenny, good night. Want to give me a kiss? Okay, bye. Okay.
Hi, well, we're back again. We'll talk a little bit more about Nap LaFleur and try and wind this episode up very briefly. And as I said previously, I can't do justice to Nap. He was a wonderful man, and I have the greatest respect for him and what he did and his memory. And I hope that the few things that I can contribute here perpetuate some of that greatness that he had. Well, to get started now, where were we? Knapp just started his hardware store on First Street Southwest. And he started out pretty small. Like I said, he borrowed money and he did this and that. And he prospered. He sold a good line of merchandise, and Knapp was had a good personality, and he was a hard worker, and he prospered. In other words, I don't say he got rich, but he made a little bit more money than he spent. So as the economy picked up after World War I in the 1920s, and we all know how the economy prospered and how it boomed in the 20s under Coolidge and so on, 1925 and 26. About, I'd say it was maybe 19 27, Knapp figured that he was ready to expand. So he moved out of this old building where his Dakota hardware had began, whichever one is correct. And he moved over to one of the newest and the finest buildings in Minot, right across from the fire hall, where it used to be located on, that would be First Avenue. And history is a funny thing. Right to this day, Knapp's grandson, Dr. Paul Purdy, has his dental practice offices upstairs in this same building. Well, to continue, the economy was booming. Knapp moved over in this beautiful building and a beautiful store, and he had a beautiful stock. He handled nothing but quality merchandise, whether it was a coffee pot or a washing machine. And things went along and prospered. And Knapp was probably making more money then than he ever had in his life.
Wasn't he a commissioner or mayor or something?
Well, yes, we'll come to this. And he was civic-minded, and he was active and interested in the community, and he became a city commissioner. At that time, Minot was under the commission form of government. So Knapp became fire and police commissioner, which was not only a prestigious job, but a powerful one. And the money was coming in, and Knapp was, which I failed to mention, was a great sportsman. He loved to fish and to hunt. And as he expanded his career into the city commission and became quite a man about town, he drove a big car, and he'd love to go on fishing trips and so on. And he kind of, I shouldn't say lost track of, but he didn't watch the business as closely as he normally would. And to make a long story short, I hate to use that phrase because I've used it several times, but we have to try and shorten this up. When the big crash came in 1929, which wiped out a lot bigger men than Knapp, he was wiped out. And so, in order to salvage a little something, he lost the store. He had a terrific stock. He couldn't pay for it, and of course, I'd like to explain that although Knapp might have been a little bit too spread out in some ways, the crash wasn't his fault. If the crash wouldn't have come, I'm sure he'd have survived. At any rate, he was wiped out. So the only thing he could salvage was by putting it in his daughter's name was his home and his automobile. Outside of that, I'm sure Knapp lost everything. Well, this is quite a shock when you're, I don't know, in your 60s and worked hard all your life.
It's amazing he even started a business that late in life. But he did. He had to be, how old was he, 50-some?
Yeah, but he lost the whole thing. And of course, Knapp had been very active politically. All his political friends ran from him, and he was left high and dry. The only one he had left to really help him was his daughter Ruth, who was a very good daughter in that respect. And he lived down at the home, his former house, with Ruth, and she was very good to him. And he kind of agitated. I mean, in the the sense that he was no longer important. He'd lost his business. He was just taking things easy. And still, it's amazing. He still wanted to expand. So what do you think this old man did? He went clear up into northern Canada, bought himself some beachfront, and he built, I believe it was 5 or was it 7 cabins. He built them with his own hands. That's how energetic he was.
And how old was he now?
Well, he was well over 70. And he built these cabins, and he started a little, what he called a resort for fishermen. And the place was Fish Lake, about 250 miles north of Minot. And now we get to the, we're coming to the end of his career. While he was up there, Knapp, of course, in his gregarious and his getting to know you fashion, made friends, and he picked up a half-breed up there who was sitting around scratching his nuts. Helped him. He called him his man Friday. And this fella, I forget his name, but he used to help old Knapp, and I guess he helped him build the cabins, and he was kind of a gopher and a handyman. And Knapp used to eat over there. Well, one day after Knapp had got the thing going, and he had not a big deal, don't get me wrong. These cabins were pretty primitive, but it was the type of country and locale that real fishermen like to come to. And Knapp, of course, was up there alone, and he used to eat with this breed and his family. And I have a reason for saying this, because they went into town for supplies one day, about 2 weeks or so before Knapp died. And Knapp was not a drinking man, as far as I know. Knapp, he could go without a drink for years, and probably did. But once in a while, he liked to take a drink to be convivial, and because he was a hale fellow, well met, and had a good personality. And they went into this saloon somewhere up in Canada and had a couple drinks. And this breed thought, well, Knapp is old and goofy. And Knapp caught this bastard trying to beat him out of $20 that he'd laid on the bar. Now, I don't mean Knapp was drunk. No. He probably only had a couple drinks. In fact, he was damn sharp. But he caught this guy, and he accused him, and he more or less threatened, I think, that he was either going to get rid of him or take him to the law or what have you. And this fella, this breed, decided, this is now simply my opinion. I have nothing to base this on except my own paranoid mind. But inasmuch as Knapp ate with them, and I think some of my suspicions might be substantiated a little bit by what I'm going to tell you, he felt threatened, this breed. And he didn't know whether Knapp was going to prosecute him or not for stealing this $20. So my theory is that they slipped poor old Knapp a Mickey of some kind in his food when he ate with them, because poisons were very accessible and very plentiful for these people up in the wilds to use on predators and on their trapping lines and so on. Because to substantiate what I'm going to say, Knapp had a meal with them, and decided to come home to Minot in September. And the weather was nice. In fact, it was warm. And on the way home, Nap drove in his old Model A pickup. He didn't feel good. And he got home.
Was this right after the meal?
Well, it was subsequent to it, sure. But he drove home, and he was sick. And this drive was at least about a day's drive. You know, with those old cars. And Nap didn't feel good at home. He was throwing up, and he thought he had the flu, and so on. And finally, he got so bad that he had to go to the hospital. Maybe this wasn't September. Maybe it was October, because Nap died in November. Well, anyway, he was so wrenched and racked from the stomach trouble that he never had before in his life. When he went to the hospital, of course, the doctors determined that what few teeth he had were infected and should come out. And so they pulled what teeth he had left in the hospital. And old Nap, being a real old rugged individualist, and I can understand his position, he wouldn't use a bedpan, so for nature's needs, he'd get up and go to the bathroom. Well, on this particular Sunday, I can't remember the exact date. Bubby and Toots and my mother would know. It was in November. It was either November 2 or November 9th. I think it was the 9th. He got up and he went down the hall because his room didn't have a private bath to relieve himself. And the nurse heard a thud in there. And they went in, and there was old Nap collapsed on the floor after he'd relieved himself. And that was the culmination and the end of his life. I guess they said he was 77 years old. Now, I don't know. I have no way of verifying Nap's birth. I said at the first episode he was born in 1864. Well, this is really hearsay with me. Maybe he was born before, maybe after. But he had reached a ripe old age, and that was the end of his life. Now, to substantiate a little, my allegations of a little while ago, I personally think, with nothing to back this up, that when this breed got worried that Nap might go to the law or prove that he was a thief of some kind, he decided the best way to do was to get rid of him. And I think they slipped some of that strychnine, arsenic, or what the hell ever poisons they had available up there, which they had plenty, into his food enough. Not enough to kill him right now, but enough to tip this old man over the edge so that he weakened enough and died, and thereby removed the threat. Now, as I say, this is my personal opinion. Nap may have died of purely old age conditions that had nothing to do with this. I have to be fair about it, but this is my opinion.
Was there an autopsy?
For whatever it's worth.
Performed?
No. But the doctors, I remember, saying they couldn't understand why old Nap couldn't hold any food on his stomach. And he threw up and vomited like he did, which weakened him.
Did he have a heart attack, or did they never really determine exactly?
Well, I suppose the final diagnosis of I say, would be when he died in the toilet was a heart attack. But hell, heart attack can be caused by a lot of things. That might be the end result, not the prime reason.
Did he smoke or chew tobacco?
No, not smoked. Now and then he'd smoke a cigarette to be friendly, but he wasn't a smoker. He was a tobacco chewer. He chewed Piper Heidsieck, a good grade of chewing tobacco. He liked to chew. You bet he did. And I'm going to conclude this about old Nap LaFleur now with the declaration that, like I said before, he was one hell of a man. And he accomplished an awful lot in his life. And I'd like to say to any of my relatives, my mother, my aunts, Bubby and Toots, or anyone else that sees this, that I have nothing but the greatest respect from what I know of old Nap, and I hope that the few items I've been able to contribute have been a little bit illustrative of his life. I haven't said much about Louise, his wife. She was a very gracious and a very cultured and a very fine woman. And I don't know what else I could say about her. She died too young at 52, and this is a terrible blow, of course, to old Nap. So, with all that, I say to all you, my relatives, and to everyone else, it's been real nice to say these things about my grandfather and my grandmother on my mother's side. And I hope that you younger people who are their descendants will show a good many of the same qualities which they bequeath to you.
One moment, Dad. I want to know, what about in your lifetime, what were your own personal experiences with Nap, aside from the postcard? Just briefly.
Well, my own personal experiences were that, as I said, he was an avid hunter and a fisherman.
He took you hunting and fishing?
He took me out hunting with him once, and he took me fishing a couple of times, but I was kind of a funny kid. I mean, this was all foreign to me, and he could see that I didn't like it. And this turned him off just a little bit.
Yeah, just a minute, Mom.
So, my experiences with him, he was always nice to me and good to me, and I worked for him up in the hardware store. We didn't get into that. He gave me one of my first jobs.
How old were you?
Well, I was about 11 or 12, driving a delivery truck, and I learned a lot up there. So my personal remembrances of old Nap are that he was tough, and he was all business in many ways, but he was a very great man.
Didn't you have an accident with one of his trucks once or something?
Well, yes, I had a couple of them.
How old were you at this time?
Same age, maybe 12, 13. Yeah, I ran into the back end of a guy because the brakes I was going too fast. I'll admit that. But when the traffic blocked up and I hit the brakes were shot on this old Ford. And I slammed into this guy enough to really shake his ass up, but didn't hurt him. And then one time I left the truck in the driveway of our house over on 9th Avenue, and the parking brake didn't work, and it rolled down and poke through a window in the neighbor across the street. So,
how did Nap react?
well, he handled it through insurance, and he looked at me just as much to say, well, what can you expect with an idiot like that? You know, and I can understand his reaction. So, but my remembrances of old Nap were always very good. And like I've tried to indicate in this short history, I regard him with affection and a lot of respect. Well, hi there. I mean, especially you LaFleur girls. In this incomplete and perhaps incorrect and, what should I say, biased opinion of your father, Nap LaFleur, and your mother. And I say biased because, believe me, I'm on their side. So I'm probably a little bit prejudicial in their favor. Bill and I thought that there was a couple of more things we should include. And could we ever do it completely? No. But in this short time, now I showed you at the beginning in the first episode this picture of a younger Nap LaFleur, his calling card. I commented how sharp he looked.
What was he, about 40,
well,
44 years old?
Yeah, he was in his 40s here, but he sure doesn't look it, and he was a damn good-looking man. I showed you that picture. Now, in the conclusion, finally, I want to show you another picture, a portrait taken of him, probably, Toots would know, I don't really, a couple of years before he died. And it's a very nice picture. You can see that the resemblance is still there. He still has that fine head of hair, although it's white now.
Why don't you move the picture back just a little bit, Dad?
That he was always so proud of. And that button in his lapel, which I brought you up through the history, is his Veterans of Foreign Wars button, of which he was very proud, and rightly so. And this picture is very typical and very realistic of what he looked like in his last year or two. Now, I told you about his war service with the American Expeditionary Force when he was with the Knights of Columbus and in charge of this recreation and benefits for the troops. And we have another item here. I hope you can see it and focus in on it, Bill.
Yeah, I got it.
Which is a letter written by Nap LaFleur to his old friend, Attorney Jack Coyle in Minot, which I will read, which has very historic significance. And it also shows the medals that he was awarded for his service in that long ago war. And this was given to me by his daughter, Ruth, who compiled this and took such wonderful care of his records and his memorabilia. We all know about the wonderful scrapbook that she compiled and different things, and believe me, Toots, you are to be really commended for this. But here's what's written on the back of this, which I will explain a little bit later in more detail. And it says, medals earned by Napoleon LaFleur while head secretary for the 81st Division. That's the Wildcat Division, Knights of Columbus in World War I. He was the only man from North Dakota to volunteer for this work with the Knights of Columbus. And it says, given to Michael LaFleur Purdy, grandson, by his aunt, Ruth LaFleur, May 27th, 1969. Now, before I really explain this, I'd like to mention, which I haven't previously, that inasmuch as Knapp had 3 daughters and no sons, I think he was quite pleased that my parents named me Michael LaFleur Purdy. LaFleur is my middle name, and of course I'm proud of it, happy to bear it. I'd also like to explain, before Toots jumps on me here, that Knapp used to claim that his full name was LaFleur Perrier, which means the flower from Perrier, where the hell ever that is.
Paris.
Or Paris, maybe so. But anyway, that was the full name of Knapp. His last name, LaFleur de Perrier.
No, Perrier, I don't think that is Paris.
No, I don't think so. It probably a district in Normandy or in France. It means the flower from Perrier, like I said, wherever that is. But they dropped that, and the name was LaFleur, which happens to be my middle name. Now, getting back to this, old Nap LaFleur wrote this letter in France on November 11th, 1918. And I'll read it to you. It's quite short. Friend John, and as I said, John was John Coyle, an attorney in Minot, a friend of Nap's. He says, enclosed, find copy of an Army order issued today to officers in this sector. No doubt you have already seen news in print pertaining to the war of seemingly more information. But this is interesting because on the day and place it is issued right at the very front, where cannons boomed right up to the minute of 11 o'clock, and where men are even yet suffering agony and death, although the war is over. Wounded are still coming into the field hospital at this place, and I have been through today enough to do me and everything else the rest of my life. I'm very sorry for the poor chaps who had to go over today and get hit at this last minute. So this little sheet of paper, being practically an original from the very front of where all the strife is occurring, makes it an interesting souvenir. I am fine and hope to get back soon. Yours, Nat. And here's the letter. Now this is, he explained, is a copy of the order sent up to the front. 8:15 hours, France, 11th November, 1918. Hostilities will cease on the whole front at 11 hours this morning, November 11th, 1918. Troops will not pass the lines attained at that hour. Outguards will be established at that hour, and no intercourse with the enemy allowed. The line attained will be carefully marked. Enemy soldiers may be received as prisoners. Further orders will be sent later. No communication with the enemy will be permitted either before or after the cessation of hostilities. Signed, C.D. Roberts, Colonel General Staff, Chief of Staff. And I'd like to explain, especially to you younger people who may not have studied this, that the World War I, the hostilities ceased, as it says here, at 11 a.m. on November 11th, 1918. But right up until that time, at 10:45, at 10:55, at 10:59, the guns fired and men died and were wounded. This is what Nap LaFleur referred to in this interesting letter. After 11 a.m., everything was over. But it was a pity that people had to die right up till that moment. And here, Nap's medals were the Grand Guerre, which means the Great War, 1914 to 1918, which was awarded him by the French government. This other one is an emblem of the 81st Division and the Knights of Columbus, which was awarded to Nap for being a secretary and serving in France for the Knights of Columbus. This other one is engraved and it says awarded to Napoleon LaFleur in recognition of his patriotic service as a secretary from the Knights of Columbus. So that is a piece of history, people, that is
tilted the other way, Dad. It's
really valuable and which I really treasure because it's a fitting end to the life and times of Nap LaFleur. So,
what about the thumbnail?
Yes, I think it's interesting to notice. I remember, you know, they say that people die as they have lived. And like I've indicated previously here, in telling about Nap as little as I have, how he was a worker, and in building those cabins up at Fish Lake, or Crooked Lake. I must be getting goofy. The name of that place where he built his resort was Crooked Lake, not Fish Lake. He hit his thumb, his left thumb, with a hammer. And he was either working on the cabins or doing some repair job. And it's emblematic of what I said a moment ago. One thing I can remember about and you know, I'd like to explain, we always call him Old Nap. And this is not a derogatory term. It's an affectionate one, really, because when we came along and knew Nap, he was old. So when I said Old Nap, this was meant in that context. But getting back to where he hit his thumbnail, one of my sharpest memories of standing by Nap's bier and looking at him with his hands crossed in the coffin, as they are wont to do, there was that old gnarled hand, and the thumb, which was upper, black and blue, where he hit it with a hammer when he was working. Accidentally, of course. But old Nap, he went to his grave with the mark of his energy and with the mark of his industriousness and with the mark of his working right up till the end. Okay?
There's the clock that's been ticking in the background.
Well, both of them.
Well, I can't get the other one.